Hey, it's Jordan. Delighted to be joined by legendary environmental advocate Erin Brockovich, who
Hi, Jordan.
been speaking extensively on the East Palestine, Ohio train derailment and explosion, which they called a control release. Um, so I believe you were on the ground there. Can you kind of talk about it? It's not your first rodeo, but I'm talking to residents who
Yeah.
kind of feel like they're kind of up the river with one paddle. They're not getting clear communication. It just came out. There's more toxins that were released than previously known. And I know you're being really, really bombarded by messages.
Yes. So I'm not out on the ground. I have been aware since the train derailment, explosion controlled burned happened because many of the community members were emailing me and they were obviously concerned, afraid. Some were being evacuated, others were outside of that evacuation zone. What was going on? They weren't getting information. What should we do? And I monitored it not from afar, but closely through them who was messaging me, trying to ascertain myself what was going on. And it couldn't seem to really get any answers. On Sunday, I threw out a Twitter response, why was nobody talking about this? This happened on February 3rd, and there almost seemed to be like a media blackout on it.
Yep.
And the people were still continuing to write, and the story had been elevated. My chickens died. My cat died. We're seeing dead fish in the river. We're scared. We can still smell it. We were told it's vinyl chloride, but we're told it's safe to come home. People in neighboring communities, even in Pennsylvania, are feeling like there's been an impact. So the response to a train derailment carrying many cars of combustible vinyl chloride that is spilling into the air, the water, and the soil, and this community is confused, doesn't know where to go, gives it any answers, and nobody, in my opinion, that I observed federally, and especially if the state was having a hard time dealing with this, was stepping up to the plate, showing up and being there and answering this community's questions and help to quell their concern. And it just stinks again of something, Jordan, that I think that we've all seen over the course of decades. When there's a disaster, there seems to be lack of transparency. I've never seen a situation like this before where the media, or there was like a 10-day window of anybody being involved or absence of information in a hazardous train disaster. And so it's super frustrating. I can't imagine how the community feels. And I'm here, and I did that tweet in support of them, going, really, what the hell is going on? And
Right.
why are we not discussing this? And people reporting they're concerned who to trust. Is it the railroad
Norfolk Southern, yeah.
Norfolk? Thank you. Boy, that was a tongue tie for me. Are the only ones doing testing? Well, I've done this rodeo quite a few times. I think you have too. I'm not sure I'm going to trust that testing.
I'm
Is
not.
that the only testing that the state and or federal EPA is relying on? Do you really have enough information to call all clear? Is anyone from those agencies going and collecting the dead animals? So there just seems to be a big gap, lack of transparency, smells like a cover up. What the hell is going on? And if you don't know what the hell is going on, I think you need to tell the community, I'm not sure what the hell is going on.
Right. And, it's just, you don't need to be a chemist or an expert. Common sense. How do they tell people it's safe to go back if you're still testing and you haven't completed testing? We don't even need to get into whether we trust the testing yet, but they have not completed the testing yet. They told people in the immediate evacuation zone, it's safe to go back. So seems like that's playing, Russian roulette.
Very much so. And we've seen that before. It could take weeks before we begin to uncover what the magnitude of this is. So did they, or are they letting them home too soon? And you're right, this is a common sense thing. This is a community that is feeling like nobody's seeing me, nobody's hearing me, nobody's responding to me. I'm scared, I'm concerned. What is the data that you or do or don't have? Where is it coming from? And you and I both know oftentimes we find out after the fact, after you've let everybody home, after you haven't really been forthwith that, oh, Houston, we have a problem.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that is extremely concerning.
Yeah. And I want to ask you, I mean, according to the EPA, they have tested, this was as of yesterday. Let me pull it up here. They have tested 291 homes.
I've read that.
And they're saying, based on that 291 homes, no detections of vinyl chloride or hydrogen chloride were identified. For the completed homes, there are 181 homes that remain to be screened. I don't know where they're getting that those are the only homes that need to be screened. As we're seeing, this is well beyond just the immediate area. They're Correct. Smelling this in Pennsylvania, east of East Palestine, smelling it west. I'm seeing photos 20, 30 miles down the road of soot or stuff from the explosion. What are your thoughts? I mean, this is definitely not your first rodeo, not my first rodeo. EPA testing is often, if you want to give them the benefit of the doubt, flawed or not totally thorough. Do you trust? I mean, maybe they're not detecting it now, but what do you think of their claims that they're not detecting it?
I don't trust. In all fairness, it is going to take some time to do all of this testing. Now, some of the reports I've read that the EPA initiated yesterday, they're almost talking out of two sides of their mouth because they state it's a known toxic substance, vinyl chloride, and it's known and continues to be known that it's leaking into the water, into the air, and into the soil. Okay, so we have that side of their story. But then over here they go, well, we tested the homes. I've read where they didn't find any detection limit within the limits that they're supposed to be looking for. Well, that says to me, that doesn't mean you didn't find it.
Right.
But that's safe to go back. Which is it? So it's really frustrating that the agencies can't get it together, have a consistent story, because you're creating your lack of response and the way you are responding. Giveth, taketh away. Well, it's here, but it's not dangerous. Well, it is a hazardous chemical, but you can go home. Creates more confusion, certainly creates the conspiracy conversation to go on, or the conversation that you shouldn't be trusted, or you're not doing your job. God forbid anybody speak up and say, where the hell are you? Where is consistent information? Are you down on the ground with these people? Why are you, their leader, is not communicating with them? Why, Jordan, do I hear from them and you hear from them? Because somebody's not answering their questions. And this community, as all communities, deserve more respect than that from their local, state, and federal leaders, and stepping up to the plate. And by God, if you don't know what's happening, you're uncertain, you need to tell them that. Otherwise, you leave them defenseless to even know how to protect themselves.
Right.
Because they're relying on you to do that for them. And it's just a kick in the gut when another community finds out once again, yeah, our local, state, and federal leaders don't have our back. So they need, and they are the ones that are on the ground. And we and these agencies should be listening to them. They're the ones living it, breathing it, exposed to it, and are experiencing it. Yet we almost downplay that.
Right. And obviously this Not going to come
Am
as
I
a surprise to
screaming
you.
on here? I'm sorry if I'm screaming. I'm
No.
so frustrated. I just dawned on me. I'm kind of screaming at you, and I don't mean to be.
I'm honored.
Really
I'm
feel
honored to be screamed at by Erin Brockovich.
for this community. This has been 30 years, and it's the same story, Jordan, over and over and over again. I don't know if they're expecting a different reaction or response, but it's complete and utter, a little too late, lack of transparency, failure on how to appropriately respond to a national disaster.
Right. And I haven't been going 30 years, but I've, in the last 6 years of covering Flint, it's eerily similar. I mean, you've been to Flint, you've been involved in justice for Flint. They literally were telling residents, don't believe your lying skin, don't believe your lying brown water, don't believe your eyes.
Right?
Your water's fine. You got
Right?
rows of dead fish. I interviewed somebody, his fox died, other foxes,
Correct.
coyotes are sick. The blood tests on those animals showed elevated liver enzymes, chloride, lung inflammation. So if that's happening to the animals, what's happening to the humans? And the other,
absolutely. And why is that not being reported at a national level? I mean, this is a great conversation for us to have. This always feels like a huge gaslight. I don't know any word to use on these communities. Oh, that's right. What you're seeing, this takes me back to my days in Hinckley, California. Oh, Erin, the two-headed frog in green water that you see isn't real. And then it makes us question ourselves, and it's like, wait a minute. Oh, yeah, no, what I am seeing is real. And I'm going to validate and stand with every community that is the persons in the disaster that is experiencing it. Believe me, they're not lying. And for whatever reason, I don't know why these agencies don't want to hear from we, the people, as to what's happening to them, to us, in a situation like this on the ground. They're there, these agencies in DC, and not everyone's stepping out there to find out for themselves. And so there's a moment here, I wrote this in my book, Superman's Not Coming. These crises have gone on way too long. And Jordan, we're going to have another one. But we've got to stop thinking or being comfortable or complacent. And I say that because sometimes in my life, I too have become comfortable or complacent, or thought that these entities, agencies, and leaders who were in place were in fact going to take care of us. But we're learning more often than not. It's a cover-up. It's not transparent. They're not forthwith. They don't have our back. So my hope is still in, as it was in the people of Flint and the people of East Palestine, who are going to doggedly stick with this story, speak up, speak out, ask the necessary questions. And yes, I think they ask the best ones. Citizen science is here. Common sense is alive and well. They know, well, let's see. It was vinyl chloride. It was a controlled burn. Maybe it went bad. It was going to explode. It derailed. Maybe my chickens and foxes and cats and the fish and the coyotes being sick were gassed. What is going to happen to us? Right. So they need to band together, like we've seen in Flint and Jackson, Mississippi, and Hinckley, California, and these situations play themselves out through the United States. And they are going to have to protect themselves. So they've got to follow what they see, what they smell, what they feel, and protect themselves.
Absolutely. And by the way, the rail company forgot to mention that it wasn't just vinyl chloride. They had, I'll mispronounce some of these,
correct.
But I'm sure you, butyl acrylate, ethylene glycol, monobutyl ether, isobutylene, non-hazardous lube oil, which sounds not dangerous, but when you're releasing up to 30,000 gallons, petroleum oil, I mean, because you've educated a lot of Flint residents who had to become experts in what these things are. But
that's citizen science. They're alive and well, and they're smart.
Yeah.
And I support that. I know as you do too, because that's the only way we're going to ultimately find out what really is going on down there.
Can you talk about kind of the playbook? Because I keep seeing this happening in you know, poor Black communities, poor brown communities, poor white communities. I think the reaction I know the reaction tends to be differently if it's more of a affluent suburb, where they preemptively, if it's, you know, lead lines, will take out the lead lines preemptively before there's a problem. If something like this happened in a wealthier area, they certainly would have folks out of that area. You might have the governor asking for an emergency disaster declaration, which Governor Mike DeWine of Ohio, as far as I know, has not requested that yet to the federal.
I haven't seen that either.
So what, in your experience, does the actual areas these are happening and the makeup of the residents and frankly, poverty play a part in the sweeping it under the rug?
Well, they actually do, because I don't know if there's a perception or idea by those leaders or those agencies that they're just not going to figure it out. They're just going to run the clock on them, which I think is a huge mistake, because they are figuring it out. They will figure it out. They do count. They do matter. They do have a voice, and they're learning how to really start using it. And bravo for that. But oftentimes they are dismissed because they think they're not going to find out, or they're not going to understand what it means. I mean, it's an entire learning curve. And I've seen plenty of communities willing to go and do that. And they have a great sense of common sense. And they know something's wrong, but they get pushed back on or suppressed or repressed because they're told, oh, you shouldn't ask any questions. And if you do ask any questions, they're not smart questions and you don't know anything. I mean, I've been here, done that. When I started my workout in Hinckley, my gosh, I was 31 years old. I'm 62 now. Dare I date myself? But everyone told me, you're not this, you're not that, you're not a doctor, you're not a lawyer, you're not a scientist, you don't have a good education. So what is it you should know? Well, my gosh. And I think all these communities are learning, I don't need to be any of that to be a human, to matter, to count, and to tell you what I'm looking at, what I'm experiencing, what I'm drinking, what I'm smelling. Is it right?
Can I ask you about the media? We started on, it was almost like a blackout, but this is not either of our first rodeos. I mean, honestly, to me, sometimes I feel like I'm in the Twilight Zone where I break the story, and it's really hard to break important investigative stories about environmental calamities, cover-ups. But the harder part is getting the media to give a damn. I mean, aside from a couple articles here and there, or in many cases, local media kind of regurgitating whatever the agencies tell them, pushing out data without any investigation, whether the data is credible. It's swept under the rug. We're told, the water's fine, the air's fine, whatever it is. And in this case, I mean, I'm sorry. I guess people are worried about the spy balloon, but there's more coverage of that on CNN than a chemical mushroom cloud over Ohio and Pennsylvania. Why is the national media just ignoring this mostly?
Well, they're not now. Boy, I sure saw a lot of national media on it last night. And
good.
I asked the same question you did. This is how this kind of just, in some regards, blew up. I just asked a simple question on Twitter. Why nobody talking about this? I'm glad that we are now, but it is really concerning that there was a 10-day, when did this happen? February 3rd? Today's February 14th. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. There was nothing. And then a reporter got arrested, last Thursday? I think that started rattling, certainly, some curiosity in cages. But you ask a great question. I asked the same one. Where were you? How does that happen? That we have a train derailment of 10 cars carrying a very toxic substance that's going to explode right in a community of 4,500 or about 5,000, that's suddenly under emergency evacuation orders, not make the news.
It's crazy. Also, I want to ask you.
No, I don't know the answer to that.
On the water end, not that you asked me to plug your book, but you wrote a great book. I finished it recently before my newborn.
Oh, congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Superman's Not Coming, Our National Water Crisis. I mean, I've been screaming about this for years, you much longer than I, but it's not a sexy story for the media, but I don't know of any more necessary or essential need than water to survive. There's a water crisis in America between lead, PFAS, whatever else is going in the water now. And nobody seems to care. But in this case, what are residents supposed to do? There's no guidance. Should they drink the water? Should they get bottled water? It's not cheap to get bottled water. I mean, what are they supposed to do?
You ask a really good question, and they're going to have to rely on themselves, their instincts, their common sense. You know what they actually really do know. Discuss it with your other neighbors. If you feel the water's unsafe, don't drink it. You may have to get some bottled water, but you know what you're experiencing when you're on the ground like that. So if you're not certain, ask questions. If you're not certain, don't drink the water. If you're outside and you're still smelling something and you feel uncertain, go ahead and shelter in place. Listen, they don't need to ask permission from anybody to know what to do to protect themselves, because that's what they're going to have to do. And I don't think that they're going to have anyone out there leading them into a natural conclusion of their own common sense on what to do. And that's what they need to listen to. Each other, band together, talk together, keep asking those questions. If you're uncertain, get out. If you smell something, you can shelter in place. If you don't trust the water, don't drink it until we have further confirmed information about what is or isn't happening in that community.
Right.
Follow your own gut, your own instincts, and don't question it.
I want to play this clip. This is with a resident I spoke with earlier in the day, right outside the evacuation zone. This was before the controlled burn. So this was just when the fire was happening. Here's what happened. Her son, who has asthma, and his reaction. What were you seeing right after you said that you entered his room and he was shaking?
He was projectile vomiting across the floor out of nowhere. He was very confused. I mean, like, he did wake up out of the middle of his sleep, but he was shaking. He was begging for water. He said he couldn't breathe. Yeah, it was scary. There's vomit on his floor right now because we ran out of there so fast that I didn't know if he was going to stop breathing. I didn't know what was going to happen. He had been hospitalized for asthma before, went from 0 to 60. So I didn't know what was going to happen at that time. We ran out of there as fast as we possibly could after that. And like I said, he did get sick once about an hour later at the hotel. He broke out with some rashes on his skin, but they've since went away. But we have not been back. We have not been even close to the area. He's been okay lately, other than emotionally, mentally, but I'm terrified to go back. I mean, not only for myself, but definitely for him.
And can you talk about how old is your son? And obviously it must be extremely concerning when you saw him shaking in the middle of the night and vomiting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm sorry. It's so personal. It's very personal. It's very scary. He's 9 years old. He's in the 3rd grade. We were painting his Minecraft Valentine's Day box for school before I sent him to bed on the night that it happened. It's still laying in the middle of our living room, half painted. Today's his party. He doesn't get to be a part of that. He's having a hard time. He's an only child. He's really kind of being withdrawn. He's scared. He's worried to go back. I've been trying to not really talk about it around him or be on my phone when I'm around him, just so he has some sense of normalcy. But I'm definitely concerned for these kids. I mean, they went through COVID and now they have this. The school was shut down for a week. Some of his friends are getting sick. It's scary. I'm really worried.
And that was before the actual controlled burn. So just the fire. Obviously, son had asthma, so might be a more extreme reaction than others, but something in the air is causing that. And
absolutely. And thank you for having her on and giving her that platform. And she's not wrong. And she's protecting her children. She is afraid to go back. They're not going back right now. And that's what we were talking about earlier. That's what you have to follow. And that was very frightening for her. And, vinyl chloride is combustible. And when you breathe it, it can cause acute respiratory. So with asthma, it might set somebody off that much quicker. And so what more does anyone need to talk about when you hear a mother like that during this situation go into an asthma attack, projectile vomiting, they're being evacuated, that something isn't wrong because something is wrong. And to think that in a 10-day window, just poof, magically, all that burn, all that chemical that has just disappeared from the soil and the water and the air, I don't think I believe that. I'm so glad that she had that moment to speak with you. And what a great mom. And I'm sure everybody feels that fear, feels her pain, but she protected her child. She's going to do the right thing. She's concerned for other children. They don't want to go back. And she sends a very strong message. And I'm really sorry that she had to go through that. And I'm sure she really is scared. My kids are grown now, but now as a grandmother, you worry about their future health impacts. And you and I have learned more often than not, we find out that information way too late.
Literally, in the case of Flint, I just looked back. I was there last year. I interviewed 10 people in a roundtable. 3 of them died within the last year. And that happens all too often. In this case, unfortunately, it's going to be a slow burn. Unfortunately, you probably will have some people, more than some people, vinyl chloride connected to liver cancers and other illnesses. You'll have legal battles for the next 10, 15 years, eventually maybe a big settlement. But by then, how many people will be permanently sick or dead?
Correct. And I am glad the law is there and we do have these settlements that you hope can help make people whole again. I don't know how you ever make anyone whole again that you've poisoned, who's shortened their life, or they themselves will get cancer, or somebody in their family or a child. We have to do better than this, Jordan. And this is a systemic problem. And I talk about failed infrastructures, but I think we have to start looking at failed institutions, failed agencies, antiquated and failed laws and policies and leaders. Yeah. We have got to change the way we do business, the way we conduct and treat our environment moving forward, or we are, I really think, in for some trouble. We're at that fork in the road and we can't afford. It's frustrating to see the government kick the can down the line on these issues, just like industry does. We can't afford to kick this down the line any further. My gosh, our greatest commodity, the greatest gifts we have in this country is our land, which we no longer can grow food on from forever chemicals, to our water, and to our people. And all of it is being damaged. This isn't a fire drill. This isn't like some earthquake drill. This is happening. This is real. And shame on us. We aren't prepared for these issues. We should be. That's part of the problem.
Right.
And so I think it's imperative that we no longer kick the can down the line, and we are going to have to push hard to change not only just, look, we have the lawsuits. We have to change policies. We have to change some of these ideas of how it is we think we can treat this environment. And we have to understand whatever we put into practice back then, Jordan, isn't serving us today, and it's not going to serve us going forward. And I think, in part, we as the people, we need to speak up a lot more and a lot more loudly.
Last question. Obviously, there's plenty of political blame to go around. If people don't know, under President Obama, he proposed regulations that would mandate these rail carriers to update their brake systems. That's part of why these derailments are happening, because they have very, very old, outdated equipment. When Trump got in, that was repealed, unsurprisingly. Obviously, President Biden, as far as I know, hasn't spoken up about this. What is the role of political leadership? Governor DeWine of Ohio, that mother I spoke with told me DeWine was in town, but sprinted out after that control burn, and has not. And,
for him, right?
yeah, and hasn't, as far as I can tell, has not given guidance or even issued an emergency declaration. And I don't see anything other than the EPA testing from President Biden. So what do you think needs to be done?
Well, look, our railroads is a federal issue, right? We've had a little more few train crashes than we should have, even in the past few weeks. I mean, just back, November 2022 in Louisiana, hydrochloric acid, there was a big train derailment. I know that there was one in Houston. We're looking at this one now. Federal oversight must maintain the infrastructure of the rail system. And I want to know what caused the derailment. As you said earlier, it could be bad brakes. I don't know that we know yet, or if that investigation is completed. My position for any president: you are the president of our country. And there was a serious disaster involving the railways, transporting toxic, hazardous material. What else are we not knowing? Was the weight load wrong? Did you load too much up? Did you try to squeeze too much into 10 cars instead of 20? There's a lot of unanswered questions. But these people deserve acknowledgement and to hear from you. At least I'm aware of the situation. I'm overseeing the situation. Had it been a plane crash, you probably would have showed up on ground. Had it been a huge fire, would have shown up on ground. Why is it you're not there? And you are president of this country. There has been a disaster in this state. It is toxic chemicals. It is being transported. It is crossing other state lines. What will the outcome be to the environment? But most importantly, take the time to hear from the mother that you just interviewed and others like it. And part of your job is to assure them of their safety. And I'm not sure why we're not there doing that.
Absolutely. And anything else you want to say just about the water crisis in general, because this has been your life's mission, one of your life's mission. I would really recommend, if you have the time, getting Erin's book, because it's very, very easy to understand. There's a big problem in this country that is basically been largely erased or ignored by the media. Our water, I don't want to, unnecessarily scare anyone, but our water, even in nicer cities and towns, has a lot of junk in it. And it's very, very problematic for development, for vulnerable, immunocompromised people. What should people know as far as the water they're drinking, bathing in?
Be informed. And you don't assume or wait or expect or think that somebody else is going to give the information you need to know. You own your health, you own your land, you own your water that you drink. If you are uncertain, ask questions. Oftentimes people are afraid to ask questions because somebody's going to think it's silly, or you don't know what you're talking about. Look, none of us, as we said earlier, you don't need a science degree. And this is no disrespect to science or politicians. Well, I'm going to laugh at that one with politicians, attorneys, some leaders, but you know what's happened to you. And we oftentimes just don't follow that because we think somebody else will come to fix it. I think we are waking up and seeing that that's not happening. For me, after doing this for 30 years, and this is still happening, what is it that when you continue to do the same thing over and over?
Definition of insanity.
Results? Yeah, what is it? What is the definition of insanity?
Yeah.
I don't know what we're thinking. And I think it will take us waking up and pushing back in numbers, state by state, community by community. This just can't continue to go on to the detriment and of everybody. And this is where, stop the politics up there. This isn't an issue that belongs to right or left. This is everybody's issue. Everybody. And the tit for tat, the constant jabs, and you said this and you said, it's enough already. How can you be our leaders and expect us to respond appropriately when we're watching how you're leading? We, the people, will get it together. But there are days that I feel like crying. There are days that I honestly could pull my hair out and I'm frustrated and I feel like I'm down the rabbit hole with you. But I'm not going to get stuck there, because I still believe, and the hope is in us, in this community in Palestine. They know how to deal with this. They will get themselves out of harm's way. They will get the answers they deserve. But they have to not be afraid to speak up, speak out, and just at the end of the day, hold your ground. This is flat out wrong, and I need some answers. So it's a lot of frustration, a lot of passion, a lot of compassion, a lot of exhaustion. I can't imagine how some of these communities feel, and such deceit and a kick in the gut that we thought, and we set up a system that was supposed to be designed to protect and preserve our environment and public health and welfare. And it is just, it's just like being blown off. It's hurtful. And no wonder this country is so angry. But I don't want us to lose the hope in us and each other and standing together in a fight for clean land, safe water, a safe environment to raise a happy, healthy family.
Amen. And thank you so much. You know, I mostly think most journalists, experts, advocates are full of shit, but I've always admired you. And
appreciate that.
You are the definition of actions speak louder than words. So thank you for all your work, because people don't know. I mean, you're flooded at all times, including from me, emails and people asking you for help. And you are just really an inspiration, I think.
Well, so are you. And again, the work that you're doing, and it started in Flint, and you've created this platform and you're reaching out to the people. That's what it takes. Oh my gosh, I feel like the Beatles song, I am you, you are me, right? We are all together. Yeah. Thank you for what you do. And just sometimes I always feel like I have to apologize for my rant, but this is passion. This is compassion. And this is frustration. And that interview with your mother, I wish her well. She's a good mom. And I'm going to believe and trust in that community. They will stay together, and they're going to get through this. But we're going to have to all push for more information from the agencies and from a media source to get them those answers. The damage has been done and the horse has left the barn, but how we handle that situation moving forward, which right now I think is being handled very poorly, will make a big difference in the outcome.
Absolutely.
But thank you, Jordan, so much for all that you do. I do appreciate it. I know a lot of people do.
Thanks for taking the time. Be well.
Thanks for having me. You be well too.